let's never do that again. Hey, it's great to be here. This is fantastic. I wish it was in person. This is my billionth Zoom call. I don't know if you all feel some fatigue setting in there, but I wish we were like, I don't know, around a campfire and drinking Ninja Red, getting healthy with our minds and our bodies all at the same time, right? That'd be cool. Quick story, has nothing to do with anything I'm going to talk about tonight, but I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my gosh, is that a $15 tie from Kohl's? Maybe a 2003 selection? And you'd be right, it is, but there's more. Shannon actually picked this tie out for me.
Don't believe a thing he says here.
But she had some help. Shannon had a crush on this guy that she would see around New Albany, randomly in a few different places. Happened to be at Kohl's when she was Christmas shopping, asked for his help. This is the tie he picked out because it was the way that she could start a conversation. Well, fast forward, some people knew some people, set them up. They went on a date. And far as we know, that was that guy's last date before he became a priest. So we don't know if that had anything to do with going out with Shannon. But if it did, that's hilarious. So this is the story behind the time.
100% of what he said is actually very true. And his name was Shane Fitzgerald, and he just kept showing up in my life. And I finally got a date with him, and he became a priest. So Ben, I am so, it is hilarious that you're wearing the tie that I picked out in 2003 with the help of Shane Fitzgerald.
Not an accident. Too much fun not to. But y'all, I'm excited. I know that a lot of this kind of stuff, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about when motivation lets you down. And before I start sharing screens, I got some slides prepared, which is still weird doing over Zoom, but I'll do my best. But while I can see you guys, I just want to know from you all are all entrepreneurs, you're self-starters. Do you all feel in your life, whether it's through Young Living or in other aspects, do you feel sometimes that motivation will wane? Do you feel like it is in short supply depending on the day? Am I alone in this, or are there others? Can I at least get some hands? Okay, cool. If you don't feel that way, then this probably isn't for you. You could skip ahead to the end. But the idea here is I'd like to share some life hacks, some things that I have come across. 100% of it's stolen, not an original thought to share tonight. I'm actually going to share from a host of different books. And I shared this with my networking group last week, actually, and we had a discussion around it. So with the discussion, it took like an hour. I'm just going to kind of breeze through it, but I would love it if you all would maybe throw some comments in the chat box. I'll kind of see them, but Shannon, if there's something relevant to the slide, stop me and let's throw it in there. Because I'd really like to make sure that this is as interactive as we can make it. At least I want to make it to be relevant to you all. But let's get the show on the road. All right. Ooh, here we go. All right, cool. So I can only gauge reactions from Shannon, Suzanne, and Lisa. So you guys are going to be my barometers, okay? Let me know if I'm putting y'all to sleep. But this right here is the formula. Just because I'm a big fan of spoiler alerts, where are we headed with this? To me, motivation is great, but it's really trumped by discipline. And then discipline is trumped by the environment that you have. And then that's really superseded by habits, the habits that make or break us. So inevitably, motivation is going to let us down. So what are we going to do about it? And that's something where I just have felt super stuck, especially over the last 6 years on my own entrepreneurial journey. I think first you got to ask yourself why. What is that why? please tell me if anyone has never heard of these books before. The first one, at least, is really, really popular. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why. If you are struggling with a lack of motivation, I think the very first thing to do is just some basic soul searching, right? Like, is there an alignment with what my purpose is on this earth? What is it that I ultimately want to accomplish? And if I am in a dead end job, or I'm plateaued, or my relationships are at a standstill, or I don't feel like I'm growing, I think it is worth taking a second, take a beat, and ask yourself, well, is what I'm doing even taking me where I want to go in the long run? And by the way, I'm a financial planner. I really love plans. I love systems. So that's probably going to seep into some of this as we keep talking. But I think if you want to examine whether your motivation is strong and sustaining, first you got to have that why. There's another book that I read that was life-changing by Cal Newport. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. So good they can't ignore you is actually a phrase that was coined by Steve Martin, who's a favorite in the McCain household. But Cal Newport is exceptional at kind of diagnosing this problem that is really, and there's not any one explanation to this, but the problem of why people change jobs every couple of years. Millennials are probably the prime offender there. I'm a stat in that regard. But before I became a financial planner, I was kind of at this crossroads, right? Excuse me. I was at this crossroads of trying to figure out, well, what's my next move? And the encouragement of this book is become a master craftsman, like develop skill sets before you write something off, before you look for greener grass, either through a new occupation or a new industry. Like, we all know those people, right? Those serial life changers that are on that circuit. First of all, have the wherewithal to know that you are good at something before you decide that it's not for you. And from there, you start stacking these competencies, these core competencies that will inform your passions. Turns out there's a couple different types of passion. One is very constructive, because it aligns with your why. It's something that it drives you, it fuels you, it gets you up every morning. But there's also a destructive form of passion that's impulsive and takes you down a pathway because it felt good in the moment. So these are the books that really kind of helped me figure out, well, what is my why and what do I need to be doing to develop my why? Because maybe you don't have crystal clarity on that just yet. So if we're going to tackle motivation, first got to have your why. Everybody on board? Cool. Beat that one to death. Let's keep going. All right. Why do we sometimes lack motivation? This is where I would really love for y'all to throw some things in the chat box, because honestly, the answer could vary between every single person in this conversation. I was on Instagram today. Not a constructive use of time that I'm admitting, but I follow this account on Enneagrams. Y'all familiar with the Enneagram? It's a personality test. I'm a 3. Are there any 3s out there? Throw it in the chat box if you're a 3. 3 is actually the most rare type that's out there. It's pretty close to the 1s, which Shannon is a 1. But anyways, this Instagram thing, and I can share it with you if you like. It just said these Enneagram types. It lays them out 1 through 9. In seasons of stress, what do you see? Well, for 3s, in seasons of stress, what you see is disinterest, apathy, and complacency. If those are not the exact opposites of motivation, I don't know what is. I mean, that's like thesaurus antonym stuff right there. Shannon's, yours are moody, withdrawn, and melancholic. That checks out. But we're not that different. I think all of us can identify with these. 7s are rigid, critical, pessimistic. That's my wife's a 7, but I guess she's never stressed. So withdrawn, secretive, detached, anxious, self-doubting, overcommitted. Motivation is lacking because we're human, and because motivation is really more of an indicator of how we feel in the moment. We can be highly motivated, or we can be not so motivated. Is there anything in the chat, anything y'all want to share about why you all sometimes maybe lack motivation? It's okay if there's not. I don't want to pause and have an awkward silence. Okay. Well, some reasons that my networking group came up with when we bounce this around are just negative self-talk, bad days, just bad circumstances, a bad break. Uh,
We've
could
got
be,
overwhelmed. Overwhelmed has shown up a few times in the chat.
oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, I've got the chat box too. Uh, yes. There's a theme, overwhelmed for sure. Um, absolutely. Like we're not immune from these things. This is real life, right? We all get it. So I think the question is, what are we going to do about it? Because most of us still have a task that we need to accomplish, whether it's on a personal level or a business level, and we can't rise and fall based on our motivation if we want to be consistent. How many of y'all have been scrolling through social media and you're like, oh my gosh, this girl, she's killing it, or this dude, like he's got it figured out. Like they may have got it figured out, but I think we're missing the forest for the trees. What they've figured out is how to triumph over a lack of motivation. I don't think they're any different than us, and if they are, they're probably pretty boring people. All right. So two books that I've read. Well, actually, one of them I haven't read the book. I need to. Jocko Willink and David Goggins. These are both Navy SEALs. So this first segment I want to talk about in how to overcome motivation. It's kind of military themed. I'm not a big oorah type of guy, but Jocko I heard on a podcast. Shane, I'll make sure you get this link because I've listened to the podcast, this one episode, maybe 10 times where he was a guest. And he wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom, or Discipline is Freedom. That's his antidote to motivation, is just raw discipline. In fact, I'm going to skip ahead. So on this podcast, the quote that stuck out to me the most is that he pointed out that motivation is great for like 15 minutes. And I was like, yes, that is it. I feel that. I feel that in my bones. It is not lasting. It is not self-sustaining. It just really, we've been talking about this. It feeds off circumstances, right? So Jocko says, good news. You don't have to feel like doing something in order to do it, right? He's this, super buff guy. He's accomplished great things. He's a speaker. He has this very decorated military history, but he just made decisions and then held himself to those commitments. One thing he talks a lot about on his social media platforms is like getting up really early. Like he posts pictures all the time of how early he's getting up, and people ask him, well, how do you do it? And he's like, it's going to rock your socks off, but I set my alarm clock and then I do it and then I get up. I used to be in sales. Well, I'm still in sales. I'm a financial planner, but I used to sell these really small, like life insurance policies for final expenses. I actually still do it, but I used to do it on a lead-based system that would take me out of Louisville to like remote parts of Indiana and Kentucky. And I would show up at somebody's house if they had requested some information. And from there, I would try to sell them a policy. It's actually pretty effective. But the limiting factor was if you could bring yourself to knock on the door. And my mentor would tell me, Ben, you don't have to feel like it in order to knock on the door. He would actually say your feelings are lying to you, which got my attention. And I think there's some truth to that. I think that feelings are important because they're indicators of something else that's going on inside of you, whether it's a fear, whether it's I don't know, fear's a big one. We can probably leave it at that. But it's an indicator, right, that you need to deal with something. But I think we're so feeling oriented. We're such emotional creatures. Even people who seem really stoic on the surface, they're emotional about something. They just got a poker face. And I think recognizing that and being okay with it, accepting it, but realizing that that doesn't have to dictate your actions is next level. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to break down like what to do to stay disciplined, because if you can't stay motivated and the answer is discipline, I don't know if that's a self-sustaining answer either, but I think that that's where it has to start. I think you have to just pull yourself up out of bed. You've got to make that decision to eat that healthy meal instead of the cheap meal. You've got to make the decision to make that awkward phone call or put yourself out there. It's just raw discipline, and there's not actually a secret sauce to it. Um, so discipline equals freedom. That's straight from Jocko. David Goggins, I read his book over like between Christmas and New Year's. Um, if you're not really comfortable with like military language, I'd stay away from it. I think there might be a censored version, but there's also an audio book that I've heard is phenomenal because this guy reads it in his voice. It's so much more powerful. But the David Goggins story really it'll inspire you. It'll get you up off your rear end if you're not careful, because this guy's like run ultra marathons, like 100-mile races on broken legs, and he had a hole in his lungs, and he just did it. I think that is foolish in a lot of ways, but I'll tell you what, like when I just feel like sleeping in a little bit and skipping the gym, I think about David Goggins. I was like, gosh, if he can do that, I could probably go do a little cardio, right? It's very relative. That discipline is inspiring. I think if we can expose ourselves to people that are inspiring and we don't just have this mentality of they're different or they're special, we can achieve great things. And seeing David Goggins' journey is really great because he was an overweight guy. He was kind of in some dead end things in his life, relationships, jobs, when he decided he was going to change, and he just made consistent changes. So some good stuff there. But our comfort zones is what really stifles our growth. And there's only one ticket out of comfort zones, and that's discipline. So this may not make sense as you read through it. I'll try to break it down in my head. Love to get your all's thoughts on this, but if it's an either or, if it's choosing what's comfortable versus choosing a disciplined alternative, these are the things that stand out to me. One is you can either decide in the moment or you can pre-decide. So 2021, that's a big word for me. I've kind of put it on my board here over to my right. And pre-deciding, I think, is so important. I'm gonna use an example against my better judgment. But this is the best thing I can think of. You guys are gonna laugh. I know that there's probably a lot of folks that grew up in the church, but you know how we have, like, with the youth, we have these purity weeks, right? Where we talk about how far is too far, and don't do that before you're married. What they would tell you, if you remember, or maybe you're on the teaching side of this, the smart thing is you have to decide before you get in the situation what your limits are, what you will do and won't do. I know that probably took all of our minds to the gutter, and I'm sorry, but it's so true. If you don't pre-decide what you're going to do before you're in that moment, you're probably going to default to the easy choice, the path of least resistance. And we are all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it today. Like it's not something that I've mastered, but it is a form of discipline that I think will take us far if we are able to stick to that commitment. You got to pre-decide what it's going to be. Also, I think you got to think outside the box. I think our comfort zones tell us this very self-limiting talk. Like we have this inner voice, right? Shannon, you and I have talked about the inner critic. Things like, I'm not a morning person, or I'm not an extrovert, or I'm not organized. It's not my strong suit. It might be right, but I think it's okay to think outside the box a little bit. Like, what if you were? What would you do? What would the behavior of an organized person be like? Is that attainable? Is that can I emulate that? Can I follow in the paths of people who have maybe that as a strong suit? Great thing is you all have a team here, right? Everyone's got different personalities, different experiences, different strengths and weaknesses. You can learn from each other, but you don't have to be limited by what you think about yourself. We're all probably our own worst critic in most cases. So think outside the box. Gosh, this is just dramatic, but like this is the type of language that Jocko and David Goggins use. Jocko says your dreams are getting suffocated by your pillows. Or he'll say, turn off the TV for a second and go do something productive. Like that's the type of people that they are. So I threw that in here because it gets your attention, and it's true. Like if you have a why and you have a purpose, what is getting in the way of it? Chances are it's a barrier that either you've created or it's something that you're putting too much stock in. Let me change that. If I am not growing, then it's probably because of something I am telling myself or something that I am making a bigger deal than it needs to be. I have this little vision board. I'm going to keep referencing it over here. But one of the other things I have on here is what are the absolutes? I'm not talking morally. There is objectively truth and non-truth out there. But in terms of like what our goals are and how to accomplish them, what are the absolutes? What are the rules? Who makes the rules? You make the rules. So think outside the box. Don't be afraid of a little discipline. You'd be surprised how far you can take it. But as we said, I don't think that's enough. I don't think discipline's going to get us there. This is just more military stuff. I'm going to move on. So I listened to that podcast with Jocko. This was before I ever read the David Goggins book. And I was like, okay, this is cool. How are we doing on time, by the way? I feel like I'm rambling. Is this good stuff? Are we good? Are we on track? Okay. I probably have another 10, 15 minutes. Less? 10. Cool. Well, good, because this is actually a section I'm going to breeze through because I cannot do this justice. When I listened to that podcast by Jocko, I thought, okay, cool. What if I'm not super disciplined? What if I aspire to be disciplined, but in the same way that my motivation really revolves around my circumstances, so does my discipline. Like, it's just really hard to be consistent, right? Whether it's weight loss, whether it's success, whether it's whatever you're working towards. So same podcast, different guests. I got introduced this guy named Benjamin Hardy. It's another book I need to read. He wrote a book called When Willpower Doesn't Work. I was like, bingo. Discipline is nothing more than willpower. And guess what? That is also not a fail-safe, right? So I cannot do this justice. You absolutely, absolutely must listen to this 45-minute podcast because this guy, he'll explain like physical laws and psychology and why we do the things that we do and how to craft an environment that makes it easier to be disciplined. Right? At the end of the day, you still got to make the choice, right? You can't really just substitute for discipline or willpower. There has to be some element of that. But what if we could lower the barrier or we could make it a little bit easier? What if we could reduce the friction to make it easier to make that choice? So these are just a few. Honestly, this 45-minute podcast is so jam-packed with good stuff that I'm just randomly I basically pick some of my favorite stuff. And it may not feel like it's all in sequence. So you got to check it out. But this kind of ties into a lot of the same things I was sharing about self-limiting behavior, or he calls it a fixed identity, saying this is just who I am. Gosh, like that is true. In a team environment, you can kind of, everyone lean into their strengths and weaknesses and they can complement each other. But a lot of us are, we have these meetings to get together and kind of collaborate, but a lot of us, we're going to, in this meeting, we're going to go into our homes, we're going to get up tomorrow and we're going to figure out our to-do list. And like, it's up to us, right? So you really kind of got to be on your A game. You can't really just excuse things that aren't happening in your favor by saying, guess it's just not who I am. That's where that fixed identity comes in. But Benjamin Hardy talks about if you craft an environment around you that makes it, he calls it an enriched environment. It gives you, it gets you targeted and focused towards the things you want to do. You're likely going to have better results. So these are just a few quotes from him. If you don't control your environment, it's going to control you. You see this, you saw this a lot in the pandemic. Some of us are still in the thick of it, but you've got distractions at home. You've got kids trying to learn. Like that's not a good environment for learning. It's not ideal. Actually, this is from Benjamin Hardy is his name. So you want an environment that is conducive to what you want to accomplish. This also has to do with the people you surround yourself. Have you all ever heard you are the average of your 5 closest friends? It's interesting. Probably don't ever want to be the smartest or most talented person in the room. Who are you surrounding yourself with that pushes you to be growing? Oh, and this thing about willpower. Willpower is conscious. Instinct is unconscious. So how can we make those things that require willpower become more automatic? He likens it to driving, right? When we first started driving, we thought a lot about checking our mirrors and turning on our turn signals and which pedal does what. But fast forward a few years, it's second nature. So what if you could create an environment that makes those hard decisions, whatever they are, whatever makes it hard to stay motivated and disciplined, make them easier. Um, so automation is your friend. Um, Man, I'm trying to pick and choose, but he talks a lot about there's some stories out there where people who didn't limit themselves and that were really, really focused on what they wanted to do, they accomplished things well beyond what they thought they could. Think of like, um, someone lifting a car off of somebody else because in the moment they just had superhuman strength, they had adrenaline going. Same types of results you can see with this type of approach. It can be painful, it can be hard. It's going to cost you your comfort zone. But he talks a lot about forcing functions, and this is where I think it gets really practical. Because all this sounds great, right? Like, Ben, thanks, cool. Gonna go to sleep, got to do my stuff tomorrow. How am I gonna do it? It sounds great to have an environment, but that environment can be made up of what he calls forcing functions. This is where it takes some self-awareness and some creativity, but you start to see some really practical ways to make it easier to be disciplined. A forcing function is something that it's a decision that eliminates decisions. Okay. Here's a couple examples, and these are stolen straight from the podcast that he shared. He knew of a writer who would go to a coffee shop with a goal of getting a certain number of words on the page, take his laptop, but wouldn't take his charger. Wouldn't take his charger. He's got maybe 3 hours of battery life, so he doesn't have time to surf the web or get busy talking with people around him. He has to be focused. That's not the end all be all. He could still do that, but he's not going to be as productive with his time. This one's my favorite. This is actually a colleague of mine has done this, where he sets his alarm, whatever, 5 in the morning, and then he sets the coffee maker to start brewing at 5:05, but he doesn't put the coffee pot under the machine. So if he does not get up out of bed to go put the coffee pot under there, he's going to have a very, very unhappy wife. So what's interesting about that one to me is that it does not change anything when that alarm goes off at 5 a.m. in terms of what he'll probably tell himself. Like, I'm comfy. I don't want to get up. I need sleep. He's rationalizing his head. I got 30 more minutes. But now it is more painful to stay in bed than it is to get up. He would rather do that. And then once you're up, you're halfway there. There are just so many good ones. There was a really good one. I was just listening to it on my way in. I can't remember, but y'all get the idea, right? These are forcing functions. So what can you do to put yourself in a position where you have to? Maybe it's snapping a photograph and having some accountability with somebody that you're just gonna, at 6 a.m. I'm gonna snap a photo and either I'm up or I'm not. So expect it. I know people that do that on their social media. Like I have a guy that runs and he writes the number of what he ran on his mirror and he takes a selfie every day and he posts it every single day, unless he misses a day, in which case everybody knows. So I think it's good to team up on these. Otherwise, like, the forcing functions only as good as your strength to implement them and stick to them. But this thing will inevitably kick in called decision fatigue. If y'all are anything like me, this is me, right? We'll do a good day. This is not every day, but on a good day, get up early, do some reading, hit the gym, have a healthy breakfast, come to work, eat the frog. You guys ever heard that phrase, eat the frog? It means if you have to eat a frog, best to do it early in the day, get it over with. So eat the frog just means do the most challenging task you have to do, the thing you hate the most about your job or your chores or your whatever it is in your life. So knock that out. Uh, by lunchtime, I'm like, oh my gosh, I deserve a break. I need, I need, I need a nap. I need a cinnamon roll. I need an episode of Netflix. I need something. I deserve it because I just made all these decisions in a row. You get decision fatigue. And so I think where forcing functions are most effective is number one, getting started, because that's the hardest part. But then identifying what time of day or what pattern in your life seems to surface where you're like, that's where I mess up every time. It's when I get a comment on my Facebook that brings me down. I don't like that. Or I drive past the donut shop. I don't know. I'm making examples. A lot of these come back to like food and weight. It's a really transferable example. But I would think through the hardest part, getting started, and then secondly, like, what is your biggest weakness? Where can I implement a forcing function to keep me on path? All right, we're gonna keep going. James Clear, anybody heard of or read Atomic Habits? Phenomenal book. It's taken the world by storm. It is really, really powerful. Honestly, before I ever read this book, I heard Benjamin Hardy on that podcast, and a lot of this is very, very similar. I am just going to abbreviate this as quickly as I can. Atomic habits means really getting down to the atomic level, like the micro level of your day, and automating or systematizing the things that are hard. So on one hand, you've got to create good habits, but on the other hand, it might be breaking bad habits. There's a lot of parallelism here between creating a good one and breaking a bad one. So if you want to create a good habit, you want to make it obvious. You want to put it right in front of you. You want to read more? Put your bed on, or put your pillow. Put your book on the pillow. I know a guy that took this TV out of his bedroom so he would read more at night. He also likes to play video games. He put his video game console in the closet. He can still go get it and play it, but it's not obvious. So to break a bad habit, he made it invisible. Yes, taking social media off your phone. It's a good one. So the next one's make it attractive. Make it more enticing to do than to not do, like the coffee pot, or make it unattractive. This requires a little creativity. So I can't get too specific. It might need to be hashed out a little bit, but this is the template. You want to make it easy versus making it difficult. You want to make it satisfying versus making it unsatisfying. It's like duh, right? Like you read that and you're like, I mean, this guy made how much money writing this book? Like that's so basic, but it works. It works. Whether you want to quit smoking or you want to start doing things that you see other people do that are successful, whatever that is. One thing I'm trying to do is like affirmations. People say affirmations are powerful, saying things out loud in the morning. And it's not, I don't know, it feels weird to me. I don't like talking out loud, feels hippy dippy. I don't get it. But it's on my morning checklist now. And I'm giving myself a point every time I do it. This is really interesting. This is actually not from any of the books I've read, but one of the quotes that I've always very recently really has stuck with me is what gets rewarded gets repeated. What gets rewarded gets repeated. That's not inherently a good thing. Think of someone who goes to the casino and they put it all on black and they win $100,000. Chances are they're gonna have a pretty good impression of what it means to go to the casino if that was their first time, right? Small sample size, but they got rewarded. It's probably gonna get repeated. So there's a confirmation bias that comes into play. But if you can reward yourself, you will more likely repeat it. And that's kind of making it, attractive and satisfying. So I have a morning checklist now where I give myself points if I do things that I know I need to do. Maybe not every day, but on a weekly basis, I want to hit all of these. So that's what I'm trying to do. There's more key takeaways from Atomic Habits. This is my last slide, by the way. You guys have been troopers hanging in here. A lot to digest. This is something I've been processing for years. But habit stacking is momentum. So making one good decision easier to lead to the next one. So you start stacking them together. You really want to, we'll just use reading more. That's a good one. Um, but it's easier to read more after a healthy breakfast, right? So stack those on each other. Reducing the friction, again, similar concept. This one was huge for me. Never break the chain twice. I'm the type of guy where if I do something I'm supposed to on Monday, I fail on Tuesday, I'm like, well, I'll try again next week. And I just write it off until I have another clean slate, like a New Year's resolution kind of mentality. But if you don't break the chain twice, if you can just get in your head that like, okay, I messed up once, it's in the past, move on. I don't want to miss twice in a row. And if you can, even another better way to do that, another better way, that's not a phrase, but if a better way to do that is to track it. If you have a tracking system, whether it's a checklist or whatever, for me, it's phone calls. I got to make phone calls every day. I got to find people that I can help with financial planning. They don't come to me, believe it or not. So I know a lot of people in my industry, the goal is to set like 5 appointments a day with new people. So they have a little marble and they just move it from one side of their desk to the next. They have 5 of them. And it's just a visual reminder, but it's satisfying. It's like, okay, well, I didn't get it yesterday, but today's a new day. So I'm just going to move all 5 marbles over here. Don't go it alone. Get some help. Talk to people that are in the same zone as you that want to grow. We're all growing at different paces. We're all growing on different things, but there's a lot of patterns and you can find ways to work together. So if I had to break it down to 2 things to take away from this, to ask yourself, questions I ask myself all the time, because I'm an overthinker. But what area of your personal, physical, spiritual, or social life? I'd pick one. There's too much. There's too much. These skill sets are transferable. So if you figure out one, it's going to be easier to figure out the next. But figure out what area of your life needs improvement. You know the answer to it. You know it as soon as I said it. I know what mine is. What about in your business? If you could improve one thing in your business, what would it be? You probably know the answer. I try to reinvent ways. I'm like, it's an ego thing, right? Like, oh, this is the template, but I've got my own way. I'll figure it out. I'm good at this. I'll figure it out. Don't reinvent the wheel. Follow the secrets of the people who are successful. They've carved a path. It's already laid out for you. Okay, so then what action steps can you take this month? 30 days is a great sample size. Maybe that's too much though. I don't know. You know yourself. If your cycles are a day, 5 days, 10 days, 2 weeks, figure out what that cycle is and start there. Try to take a sample size of time, improve in that one area. All right, we covered a lot. I'm gonna stop sharing. I can send these slides to you, Shannon, if you want to share. I'm not super cool with PowerPoint thing. That took me like an embarrassing amount of time to put together. But it was fun. And these are the things that I'm processing and digesting in my life. So I hope it was helpful to you. I'd love to hear your questions if you have any.
Absolutely. So amazing, Ben. I took a whole page of notes. Way to go. And lots of good action steps. I do want to hear your questions that you all have for Ben about this topic. And also maybe a quick takeaway, something that stood out to you the most. So as you're thinking about what that is, Ben, you want to tell them just real quickly what you do, or do you want to save that for after we do some Q&A?
It doesn't matter. I'm happy to. I love what I do and I love sharing what it is. So I talked about your why, right? I don't think Zoom does mirror images, so this isn't going to do much good. But my why, I keep it on my board right here. It's to give people money. If that doesn't get people's attention, then I need some help. But that's it. It's really that simple. When I sold those little burial policies, which are still very effective, if anyone knows people that need them, I'd love to help them because there's a lot of garbage out there. But I used to go into homes with people that were on very low incomes, very fixed incomes, and they just needed a little bit to prevent their family from being in a big bind if they had a loss. So that life insurance background, really propelled me into financial planning, because I realized that people are generally good at saving and investing. A lot of us take advantage of what our employers give us, or I don't know, we just know what the good habits are and we try to instill them. Um, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot to operate a household these days, and it takes even more to retire. Like the purchasing power of a dollar, it just doesn't go as far as it used to, and it really makes it important to be efficient. And a lot of my clients are looking for creative and opportunistic ways that they can save money and set it aside for the future. I'm not a fee-based planner. People don't pay for my time, but we create an actual plan. Like if we know what you want to accomplish, we just work backwards and we start figuring out, well, what are some attainable goals to be intentional with our finances, so that one day we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, thank you, like thank goodness that I did this. And a lot of these habits and things that we've been talking about are transferable, right? And so in the world of finance, in the world of saving and investing and insurance, um, every dollar should play a role, and that's what me and my team help people figure out.
Can you meet with people who aren't local to you?
Absolutely. Told you, this is my billionth Zoom call. Yeah,
There
that's not
you go.
hard. I'm actually licensed in about 10 states, but it's easy to buy a license somewhere else. It's very reciprocal.
And I have known a lot of people who have utilized Ben and his services and just rave about the quality that his company provides. So David was actually saying today, hey, we need to call Ben and talk to him about that. So Benjer, be prepared, because I'm bringing Ningxia Red to our meeting, and you'll be drinking it around the campfire one of these days, right?
Whatever we got to do. Um,
So good.
I, I think one thing that is interesting about what I do is, regardless of whether you think you have too much money and you're good, or you don't have enough money, at the end of the day, you just don't want to run out. You know, your lifestyle is probably not going to change dramatically throughout your life, maybe a little bit as it goes, but I think that's just the clarity that people want. And that's what we try to help them figure out is, how prepared are we? Are we ever going to be at risk of running out? And once you can figure that out, you can make the best of it. And there's a lot of good things you can start doing.
Can I share your email address with our team and some of our chats?
Yeah,
there?
I'll type it right here in the chat box
Okay.
while you're doing more.
Anybody, I saw, so Ashley says she took pictures of her favorite slides. Catherine said lots of info. Yes. Going back to re-listen to the recording, looking for that podcast. For me, one of the things that I heard that you said, Ben, that kind of hit me between the eyes is you used to go knock on doors of complete strangers in order to talk to them about things. And if you can do that, I can pick up my phone and text or call somebody that actually knows who I am. So getting myself and my excuses out of the way, it all goes back to the battlefield in our mind and our thoughts and what we tell ourselves. So Ashley says, do you have a list of favorite books that helped with some of what you talked about? You mentioned 2 in the beginning.
Yeah, sorry, I'm typing them. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm multitasker.
There you go. Getting out of the comfort zone. Yeah, that was good. The only way to get out of it is get out of it. Oh! Did you all hear some things in here that you could relate to your Young Living business? When motivation is failing and how to get disciplined and the environment. As I mentioned, that's why power hours are so effective for me. I learned I needed time on the calendar when I'm going to meet with someone else to sit down and do work. I'm less likely to cancel on someone else than I am on myself. So, you know, Ashley and I, we get together 2 times a week, and you're welcome to join us any of those times. And that's when we sit down and we get work done, because it's on the calendar and there's accountability. That's what he's talking about, getting that environment in place to make sure you move forward. Okay, he's given
that podcast. They talk about a recording artist who, once he has an idea for an album, he goes ahead and books the recording time for 6 months later, and now he's on the clock. And he pays for it up front, so now he's got some skin in the game. And then he posts on all the social media to his fans when the album's going to be released. It's scary stuff. It is scary stuff, but it's powerful. Like, you think that guy misses a deadline? No, and he's like an Emmy winner, so it's kind of cool.
Very cool. And as a team, we can provide that for each other. If you need to find a buddy that you keep each other accountable to getting your hours of work in, or your prospecting calls or whatever. That's the value of this team and this community through it all. Really good. I got like a lot of quotes to really chew on and think about, and that coffee pot at 5:05 is really going to be on my mind for a while. Not sure I can do that just yet, but that's motivation right there. Anybody else have any other questions? Catherine said, I once read an article about throwing your hat over the fence because then you have to climb over the fence to go get it. Exactly. That's what he's talking about. What can you put in your environment to make sure you actually follow through to get it done and move the needle? Cool. Very good. Well, thank you, Ben. You have been super helpful and inspiring. Good job. Awesome. We'll have you back sometime. And did you put your email in there?
Yes. Yeah, my email, and then that's my office number. If you really want my cell, you can get it from Shannon. I don't mind passing that around either. Really love your help. I'm trying to grow my practice, and my goal's 4 introductions a day to people that are open to a conversation. Sometimes half of those 4 are not open, and that's okay. It's a numbers game. We all understand that, right? But the limiting factor to who I can help is who I know. So whether you or a friend or a family member would just like to learn or have some ideas to brainstorm on what you can do to make your situation a little bit better, that's where we excel. It's no high pressure, just education.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Bender. Thank you all for being on here tonight. We'll be talking more soon. Good night, everyone.
Thank y'all.